perspective as well. Recently now oversee admissions and marketing, and so I've been, my new title is Vice President for Marketing and Enrollment Services. I'm going to leave my card here. I still oversee financial aid and am very involved every day. So if you have questions, I'll be sure to help you find the answers. We're going to go ahead and get started, but please feel free to interrupt during the presentation. We have more than enough time, so if there's a topic that you want more information on, just sort of let me know and we'll spend a little bit more time on that. Financial aid is a very complicated topic. As a student, for me, financial aid was confusing. For my parents, it was beyond confusing. And then as we process all the financial aid documents that come through our office, the system itself at the Department of Education level is confusing. So if you feel like you're struggling, you're not alone. I think the whole country is with you there. But we will do the best we can as far as to getting the information that you need. I think first we'll just start with what financial aid is. Financial aid is funds provided to students and families to help pay for post-secondary educational expenses. So we'll talk about that a little bit further, but just as a broad perspective, that's what financial aid is. The first thing that you're going to want to research when you're looking at the colleges is what is their cost of attendance. And you'll see this COA, cost of attendance, and all the different material that you're going to get from all the different colleges you're applying for. And the cost of attendance is actually something you should be very aware of. The cost of attendance is what the average student pays to attend that college. So cost of attendance at Sierra Nevada College compared to cost of attendance at a community college or at a state school or within the state school system are all different. So you should always be really aware of what the cost of attendance is. And it includes things like the direct costs. So those are things like tuition and fees. Those are direct costs. You enroll, you get charged tuition and fees. Encompassed in the cost of attendance are also things like cost of living. So some students will live on campus and some students will live off campus. And those are different amounts, but the average student will pay X amount of dollars. Now in the cost of attendance, it's easy to get confused because you'll say, well, the tuition was this much. You know, say the tuition is $10,000 a year. Well, why is the cost of attendance $20,000 a year? That's because they're including everything in that cost of attendance, not just the direct cost of tuition and fees, but also the indirect cost, books and supplies. That student's going to pay out of pocket for those things. Toothpaste, gas money to get to and from school, things like that. So you will see that the indirect costs are rolled up into that cost of attendance. So you should be aware of two main components of that cost of attendance. What are the tuition and fees associated with a full-time student or a part-time student? But also, what is the cost of living in that area? You know, is my student going to be driving back and forth to school? Then I should probably budget for some gas money. That's also rolled up in the overall cost of attendance for each college. They do an average of what their average student pays. Sometimes you're not going to pay that direct cost because your student will live at home. So for any of you that maybe want to attend Sierra Nevada College, the cost of attendance for you would be tuition and fees. It wouldn't necessarily be room and board because your student would possibly live at home with you, so you would not be paying the additional room and board. And combined, those direct and indirect costs complete your cost of attendance. And it's different from college to college. The expected family contribution comes from filing the FAFSA. So the Department of Education gives you this number. And this is a constant. It's not different wherever you go to school. So the cost of attendance changes from school to school, but the expected family contribution does not. The expected family contribution, when you file the FAFSA, you're going to put in your family income, your savings information, how many people are in your household, and they're going to come back and say, this is your expected family contribution. It could be zero, it could be $100,000 a year. That's what's going to determine your need. So the difference between the cost of the college or the cost of attendance and your expected family contribution, the difference between those two things constitutes your family's need. So your need at one college might be different than your need at another college, depending on that cost of attendance. So those are the things that you want to be aware of. When you file the FAFSA, the most important number you're going to get back is your expected family contribution. It also takes into account your student's income. So if your student is working and filing taxes, they will also file that information, and it will also be a part of the expected family contribution. But it is one number. It's your family contribution. Okay? Does anyone have any questions about that? Because that's probably one of the more difficult things to understand. Okay. So the expected family contribution, as I said, stays the same for every college that you go to. And it has the two components, the student and the parent contribution, but they're all rolled up into the one number. And it comes from that federal student aid, or the FAFSA. So once your school has an application for admission, and when you file the FAFSA, which if your student is coming to school in next academic year, next fall, you're going to be filing the FAFSA in January. Your school's going to want to have two things. They're going to want an application for admission, and they're going to want to have a FAFSA application on file. When you file that FAFSA, that's where you put down the colleges that you want to receive the financial information. So if you haven't applied to that college yet, you can still include them on your FAFSA. Even if you haven't applied to that college yet, they'll eventually get that data. And when your application comes in, they merge the two, and they will be able to provide you a financial aid package. So you can put up to 10 colleges on that FAFSA. Okay? When the school has your application and they have your application for federal student aid, they will send you an award letter. And on that award letter, and it will be different for every school, you'll qualify for different types of aid from every college, depending on the cost of attendance and your expected family contribution. And some of those, that financial aid package will be need-based aid, and some will be non-need-based aid. So I'm going to talk a little bit about need-based aid versus non-need-based aid. Scholarships would be mostly merit aid. So scholarships would be an incoming scholarship based on GPA, for example. So a lot of private schools, when you apply for admission, including Sierra Nevada College, when you apply for admission, if you have a certain GPA, you're automatically awarded some type of a merit scholarship, specifically for schools like Sierra Nevada College that are not-for-profit, private colleges. That's very typical. You will have the opportunity to apply to the college. Once we receive your transcripts, based on your GPA, you will be awarded a merit scholarship. The scholarships you do not repay. They are contingent upon remaining in satisfactory academic progress, and for our school particularly, full-time status. But it's different from school to school, and when you receive a scholarship, remember it's free aid, you don't pay it back, and you should be very aware of the restrictions on that scholarship so that you don't make any moves to lose that scholarship, okay? Grants. Grants are generally need-based aid. The majority of schools will award grants based on the family's need. So the cost of education, say it's $20,000, your expected family contribution is only $10,000, so you have a $10,000 need. And you would then qualify for need-based types of scholarships and grants. The loans, those are both need-based aid and non-need-based aid. So there's two types of loans. One's a subsidized student loan, and the other is an unsubsidized student loan. And those go directly to your student. They are not based on credit. They're based on the fact that your student is admitted to the college, they are attending, and you file the FAFSA, and you get eligibility through filing that FAFSA. Those are loans directly to the students. They have several requirements they have to fulfill before the loan is dispersed to them, and if you have need, you could qualify for the subsidized student loan. Subsidized in that term means that the government's going to pay the interest on that loan. And unsubsidized means that you're going to have interest accruing while the student is in school. And I think I have more of a slide on this, so I'm going to stop there, but we can go more into it after. There's also parent loans. So if you don't want your student to accrue debt, and you as the parent would prefer to take that debt on yourself, you can decline the student loans and accept a parent loan, and you can be the one responsible for that repayment. The federal government will offer those 3 types of loans depending on need. The PLUS loan is not based on need, so even if you don't have need and you would like the parent loan, it's available to you at most state schools, universities, private colleges.
Are the interest rates the same on the
No.
subsidized versus the parent?
No, the subsidized loan is subsidized by the government, so they'll pay the interest on that until 6 months after that student graduates. So I always encourage parents to allow their students to take a little bit of responsibility for the financial of their college, but if they want to be very conservative, the subsidized loan would be the one you would want to limit yourself to, because the government will pay the interest on that loan the entire time your student is in school, remaining at least part-time and for 6 months after graduation. Then after that, they will start accruing interest. The interest rate is different every year, July 1, so I can't tell you what the interest rate will be for your students, because on July 1, the federal government will tell us what the interest rate is.
Are they generally the same?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, once they go into repayment, yeah. And then there's also employment. So another way to have your student take financial responsibility for their education is to have them take advantage of what's called federal work study. Majority of colleges have a federal work study program. We employ as many students as possible on our campus. We feel that it gives them professional preparedness. It teaches them responsibility. They earn a paycheck, which helps them pay for that gas money, that, movie, whatever, kind of their spending money. And we feel that it just really helps their resume along so that they're prepared professionally when they graduate. I have students that work in my IT office, in our admissions office, sort of depending on what they're interested in. Sometimes they're student assistants to professors. Sometimes they do some writing. It's just really dependent on what they're interested in. And there's usually a jobs board provided at each college, so I would look into that at the school that your student might be interested in going to. It's a really good opportunity for them to sort of be responsible. A lot of parents don't do it maybe the freshman year, but then have their students, as they have now learned how to wash their laundry and make it to school on time and all of that kind of stuff, then they would have them work a federal work study job as they mature a little bit more. But it is a really great source of financial aid. Scholarships. This is what I wanted to just sort of give you an idea. Private colleges, although they tend to be more expensive, they also tend to give much more financial aid. Scholarships come from all sorts of different places, but the institutions themselves should be the first point of contact. So at any school that you're interested in, you want to look at their financial aid page. You want to look directly at the scholarships offered and know exactly what, at the time of admission, you should be looking for, expecting to see what you should be applying for, the deadlines and timeframes for that. Grants. So grants, you'll see we have a need-based grant at our institution, and it's just based on that cost of attendance versus expected family income. You have need, you get a percentage of that need in a need-based grant. Those you do not have to pay back, but a lot of times they're variable. So when you see a need-based grant on your award letter, the question that you want to probably be thinking is, how is this grant going to be affected in the future? So, for example, at our college, you have an expected family contribution of maybe $6,000. And each year when you file that FAFSA, maybe there was a promotion at your job, you're now making 3 times as much money as you were, your expected family contribution jumps to $40,000 a year. You will see that need-based grant get smaller. So it's based on that. If you don't expect that you're going to have any major leaps in income, then you would assume that your need-based grant would stay semi-constant throughout the 4 years. But it's just something to be aware of, that your need-based grant tends to be variable at most colleges based on the information when you file that FAFSA each year. Loans. So here's where we're going to get a little bit more into the loan section. This is money students and parents borrow to help pay for the expenses. The repayment usually begins after the education is completed. So all of us in this room would hope that the students start school and then they graduate from school, and there's no breaks in the middle of any of that. That's not typically what happens. Sometimes, at our school, there's a lot of broken legs because of the athletics that goes on. So, maybe that student has to take a semester off. You have a 6-month grace period. So it's not the end of the world. They don't have to start repayment right away as long as they jump right back into school. So you usually don't want to have them take a leave of absence for more than 1 semester because the loan company will say you're not enrolled, you haven't been enrolled in 6 months, and now your repayment begins. It's still not the end of the world then. If they go back into school, they will have what's called an in-school deferment on that loan. And they will be able to defer the loan again as long as they're enrolled in college at least part-time. So enrollment's the key, and consistent enrollment is the key. But generally, repayment won't begin for the student loans, both that subsidized and the unsubsidized loan, until 6 months after that student has graduated, which allows them time, 6 months, to sort of figure out, where am I going to work, how am I going to support myself, and how am I going to pay this student loan bill. For parents, the Parent Plus loan has changed a little bit lately. There is now a provision for you to defer payments on that Parent Plus loan until your student graduates. And as long as they're consistently enrolled, you will be able to defer that loan until they graduate. My advice would be to at least pay the interest. You can do an interest only on that, so that as you go through those 4 years, at least you're paying the interest on that loan if you want to start making payments after that student graduates. We always encourage parents and students to, just borrow what is needed. So sometimes, you're offered a little bit more money than you're needed because of that cost of attendance, that student that we have budgeted for you to have the opportunity to borrow or help finance that cost of living. If your student's living at home, they don't need to borrow for that cost of living, so we encourage students not to borrow that money, just to borrow only what is needed. It also allows them to keep money reserved, so if for some reason they decide, well, I want to go to summer school, and I didn't think I was going to, but now I do, and now I want to access more money. Or I dropped my laptop, there goes a $1,000 laptop, and I don't have any money, and now I can borrow for that laptop. So it helps them reserve for emergencies in the future of the school year. Most schools will allow you to just borrow what is needed, and if you need more money, you can always contact them later, even if you decline that student loan. So be conservative at the beginning, and as an emergency occurs, you can always tap back into that offered aid from the original award. And always look at loans as an investment in the future. I had to take out student loans. My parents weren't able to really assist me through college. If I didn't have student loans, I wouldn't have a degree. I would definitely not have the job that I have now. And that was just the fact of the matter. So if that's the case that you're in, like I said, always just borrow what is needed, start with a subsidized loan, and go from there. But realize it really is an opportunity to get an education that if you don't have the financial resources to, it really is an investment in your student's future. Employment, federal work study, we kind of talked about that a little bit, but I do encourage federal work study jobs, and I always encourage you as the parent, even if you have financial resources, to get your students somehow involved in helping finance their education. I've worked with students for so many years, and the students seem to have a better respect for their education. Just like anything else, if they have contributed in some way financially to it, they have a bigger appreciation. They seem to try harder and be more proud of their accomplishment. So even if it's just the opportunity for them to get a job, start working on some of their resume, learn outside the classroom, I encourage it. There's additional sources of financial aid. So we've covered a couple of them. The federal government is your biggest source across the nation of financial aid as a single source. They are what is funding our federal Pell Grant. The federal Pell Grant varies. It's about $5,700, but it varies depending on your expected family contribution. If your expected family contribution is above $5,000, $6,000, it changes every year. It'll change again by the time you guys file. I wouldn't expect a federal Pell Grant. You have to be incredibly needy to get the federal government to give you free federal grant money. but it is there and it is a major source across the country for financial aid. Schools that are private colleges, the #1 source of financial aid is institutional scholarships and grants. So it differs from school to school, but if you're looking at a national level, the federal government between the loans and some other sources we'll talk about, the federal government's the #1. And I just wanted to point out that all of the schools, if they do have need-based grants, they award them based on the FAFSA. So if you as a family, and I get this a lot, parents say, well, I'm not going to get any free aid from the government, so I'm not going to file the FAFSA. And then I say, but you could, even though you don't qualify for federal grant money from the federal government, you could qualify for need-based grant money through the institution. So I would say a good 70% of the students at our college that are receiving need-based grants are not receiving the Pell Grant. So it's really important to file that FAFSA, even if you don't want to take loans out, because a lot of the parents will say, well, I don't want to take loans out, and I know I'm not going to get the federal grant. But I encourage them to file, and they do get an actual S&C need-based grant because they qualify for us. The threshold for us is not that $5,000 expected family contribution, is much more generous there. So I encourage you to file the FAFSA and include it in the schools, all of the schools that you're interested in, specifically for that reason, even if you know that you're not going to get federal grant money and you don't want to take out loans. There could be some other need-based grant that they won't even evaluate you for unless that FAFSA is on file, because that's what they use. States, so for example, in the state of Nevada, they have the One Millennium Scholarship Program. There's Cal Grants, so depending on the state that you live in, you would want to make sure that any state grants are available there.
Nicole, can I throw something in there for that? For the Cal Grant, that's one of the forms that's on your table. It's the black and white one with little boxes on it. That document should be, unless I don't see anybody here, there's one form that's different, that's if you're not a citizen, but this, I don't see anybody that it applies to. Fill out that form, it's very easy. We have to have your social security number to verify a GPA to the state. So basically what happens is, we need that form back, I would say before the end of February. Okay, I've already given it out there, I've given it to you guys, just fill it out and turn it back into either me or Ms. Carrillo, Ms. Blanca in the front office, and we will take care of it from there. But that form is needed, and that's a huge amount of money. That's $12,000 out of UC system, and I think $5,000 to qualify for a CSU system. It is need-based, but everybody should fill this out, just like with the FAFSA. The FAFSA does not sign you up for a single thing. The FAFSA basically gives you options to choose from, and you have to elect, even with the grants, you have to select, I'm going to accept this grant money. So even if you think you're not going to make any money, like Nicole said, I suggest all parents, no matter what your income level, fill it out. You can always deny anything, and you know, the government's already got your information anyways. They're not looking for that from you. But yeah,
and
that's what that Cal Grant
circumstances change too. And circumstances change. So when the economy was not doing well at all, I had parents who were making $200,000 a year, who, you know, on their FAFSA, they had an expected family contribution skyrocket. They really received no need-based aid, but both parents lost jobs. And that's called a professional judgment. As the financial aid director, they can go in and change your income in the system in that FAFSA mid-year so that you can then start qualifying for money. So like I said, it's really, you know, circumstances change. To have something like that on file as a safety net is really a good thing. So not in addition to states, there's also private sources and civic organizations and churches, some things you wouldn't really think about. Private sources, we take outside scholarships all the time. So the majority of colleges on their financial aid page will have scholarship search engines for you. They might actually have some outside scholarships that they promote within their institution. It's really, I always encourage students because they, you know, it's a little bit of work, you know, but if you can work for a couple hours on an essay and submit something and you got $500, I always tell students, well, when was the last time you were making $250 an hour? So it was probably a good use of your time. And also, a lot of times the essays is something, I mean, our students, writing is so heavy right now in high school. Many times the essay could be something they wrote in their English class. They can kind of tweak it, change it a little bit, so I always encourage students to hang on to all those essays, and they could be reused for different scholarship searches. There's a lot of deadlines on that, so this is the time if you want your student to really focus on outside scholarships, and most of those outside scholarships you can take to any institution, so even if you're not sure which college you're going to, searching through civic organizations, churches, private institutions, is a really good use of your students' time, especially right now before the deadline starts scooting up on us. And then your employer. I think sometimes parents forget that maybe there's something in their employee handbook about a scholarship or some type of reimbursement for tuition, and they just it never really occurred to them. So I always encourage people to pull out that employee handbook and see if there's anything in there that might be applicable to you and your student. We kind of talked about this one. The federal aid program. So when you do file the FAFSA, you're going to have a specific set of financial aid. Now, schools are different. Some schools qualify for some financial aid programs through the federal government, and some don't administer them. But all schools who are eligible for federal student aid will administer the federal Pell Grant. We talked about that one. That's very need heavy. The academic competitiveness grant just got nixed, so I haven't updated the slide. And so did the National Science and Mathematics grant. Those two just went away. Unfortunately, they were just getting a hold. But if your student is going into an undergraduate program and planning to get a teacher credential, they can qualify for this next one called the Teacher Education Assistance for College Higher Education Grant. Short, it's called the TEACH Grant. And what it'll do, it's about $3,700 a year, so it's a pretty significant amount of money. They just have to teach at a high-need school once they graduate with their master's degree in either education or arts and teaching or whatever that is. So they can receive that even as an undergraduate. There's a lot of restrictions and responsibilities once you graduate, but if you're the student knows that they're going to be a teacher and they're going to go into special education and they're going to work in a high needs field in a high needs school, there's no reason why you should shy away from this grant. The Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, it is a piggyback grant off of that Pell Grant. And schools get a different allotted amount of money, and it's sort of a first come, first served grant. So the way our school administers it, and the majority of schools, is that if you were eligible for that federal Pell Grant, and we will award an additional COG grant, is what we call it for short, and we will do that until the grant is gone. So being first in to file your FAFSA will help with this. Now, a lot of times parents say, well, I know on January 1 it opens, but I don't know what my, I haven't filed my taxes yet, so how could I provide the income information? If you are, I don't encourage it unless you know that you're in this need-based category to file before you file your taxes necessarily, but for the high need category, I suggest you go in there and file the FAFSA based on estimated information. That will get you in the queue as to who filed first. And once you file your taxes, you just log back into the FAFSA, you change it from estimated to actual, and you can link to the data retrieval tool, which will go to the IRS and just suck all of your income information right into that FAFSA in the appropriate categories. They've made it much simpler than it used to be. Used to have to add this line to this line and subtract this line to get this number, and you sort of crossed your fingers that you didn't do it wrong. Now, most people, there's some circumstances where they won't let you link, but most people can, if you filed your taxes and it's already been 2 weeks past since your taxes have been effectively filed, you can just click the, yes, I want to use the data retrieval tool. It links to the IRS, they pull in all the information, they put it in the categories based on how you filed your taxes, whether it be a 1040EZ or what have you, and then you know that you didn't do anything wrong, unless you filed your taxes wrong, then that's a little more complex. But the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant is, they have different allocations for each school. And like I said, need-based grant, and that's sort of how you can get your hands on that grant if you're in the need base category sooner. If they, I would always ask if you are on your award letter from the college, if you get your award letter and you see that you have a Pell Grant, I would definitely follow up with an email to the financial aid office just asking, is there an additional federal COG grant that can be awarded to my student? Because it's a piggyback grant, so you're automatically eligible. It's just the question of have they allocated it already. And then we talked about Federal Work Study. That is a federal program. Stafford loans, that's the subsidized and unsubsidized loan for students. So that's where sometimes parents get confused. Stafford loans, you've heard subsidized loan, unsubsidized loan. Well, it's the Stafford loan program. So those are interchangeable there. Stafford loan program encompasses subsidized and unsubsidized student loans. And then the Federal Plus loan. Now, the Federal Plus loan, I want to just spend a minute on it. It is not a need-based loan. You do start making payments on that loan unless you defer it about 45 days after the second disbursement. So there's some advantages to doing the Parent Plus loan, specifically when you have a freshman student and you're just trying to figure it all out and you haven't figured your finances out yet and payments due on the first day of school. The Parent Plus loan is great because you apply for it, it's credit-based, you're credit approved, you sort of do a master promissory note, and it's all set up to disperse on the first day of school. You're not going to be asked for payment on that loan until January, 45 days after January, when that spring semester starts at your school. It sort of buys you some time to get organized and get your finances in order and sort of figure out what is this going to cost me, what is my out-of-pocket cost, all of those things. You can also use it one year and not use it the next year. You can have it dispersed the first semester and realize, oh, I've got this under control. I think I can breathe. I don't have to buy that car I thought I had to buy. I've got some money in the bank. Grandma and Grandpa are going to contribute to my out-of-pocket costs, so now I'm not expecting, and you can cancel that second disbursement. The Parent Plus loan traditionally always had a lower interest rate than alternative loans. Those are loans from your bank. So a lot of times in the past, people would always go for that Parent Plus option because they would always undercut the bank loan in interest rate. Now that the banking institution is out of the federal government loans, the banks are now buying for that spot. So if you have good credit, the Parent Plus loan's at 7.9%, and you can actually get private loans from your bank of choice for much less than 7.9%. So unless something changes from the federal government, if you have a choice between a Parent Plus loan and your bank loan, I would compare the two. I would have never said that 5 years ago, but it's been changed a little bit now, and you can, all schools will accept, a private loan from your particular bank. Yes.
With regards to the Stafford loans, the subsidized and unsubsidized, are most of the Stafford loans generally subsidized, or is it a 50-50 cutoff?
Yeah, it's different all the time. So it's different for families because the subsidized loan is need-based. You may or may not qualify for that loan. But as a freshman student, typically they'll be eligible for $3,500 in the subsidized loan category and $2,000 in the unsubsidized loan category. Unless there's no need, then the whole amount will be rolled up into the unsubsidized loan category. But the ceiling for a freshman to borrow is $5,500.
And then the Stafford loans, the unsubsidized, is that something that they have to pay interest as they go along? Or is it that they'll add the interest onto the loan and then you're paying interest on interest as you get going?
You get a choice. So I encourage my students who are very conservative to pay the interest as they go. They do have that option, or it can accrue while they're in school and not pay anything until after they graduate. It's the student's choice. But I think the one thing to realize is that also with those Stafford loans, that ceiling or that loan limit goes up every grade level. So if you have a student who is a freshman and their ceiling is about $5,500, as a sophomore, that goes up to $6,500. And then as a junior and senior, it goes up again $1,000. So what you'll see is that as they progress through the four-year system, the government gets more faith in them that they're going to graduate, get a job, and be able to repay those loans. So they will offer them more loan limits as the student progresses. Now, If you apply for that Parent Plus loan and your credit's declined, your student is then eligible for an additional $4,000 in that unsubsidized loan category. So I don't think that a lot of people know that. They don't really talk about it on the federal site. Sometimes parents say, you know, I'll apply for the parent loan, and they get credit declined and they feel like they just got dropped off a cliff. If you were really looking for a small amount of money, make sure that you communicate with your financial aid office and let them know that you would like the additional unsubsidized loan because your credit was denied on the Parent Plus loan. Does anybody have any more loan questions? Okay. So, this will be brief on this. Check with your state, of course, to find out. We talked about the Cal Grant. Some will allow you to take the scholarship with you to another state. So it's very unusual. I never thought that happened, but for Vermont, we have a lot of students that come here from Vermont, and they bring their Vermont student grants with them. So sometimes you can take your state grant to another state. Now, I don't know if you can with the Cal Grant. I don't think you can. This presentation is for an array of people. We will work with any state agency. Most colleges will if you need help transferring state. The Millennium Plus doesn't apply because you guys are in California and not in Nevada. Private sources, foundations, businesses, charitable organizations, be sure to check deadlines and applications procedures. They're always different. Now's the time to sort of research that and schedule a time for your student to really be working on those outside scholarships from private sources. Research early, research within your community, and then just think about what organizations you belong to. I get a lot of scholarships from things that you would not imagine. So a lot of our students come in with USASA snowboarding scholarships. Who knew that they offered a scholarship, but they do. A Lions Club, you know, reading clubs, things like that. You would just not, you would be surprised at what is offered there. Make sure, it's usually this spring, so we're coming up on the application times. And employers we talked about, and small scholarships add up. So, you know, a couple of $500 scholarships and now you're off the hook for books and supplies and, you know, gas money maybe. Okay, so the FAFSA, we'll talk a little bit about the FAFSA. It's the free application for federal student aid, and I think that's the most important thing. It is the free application for federal student aid. There are agencies that are on the web that you'll think you filed your FAFSA and then they say they're going to help you through it, and then all of a sudden they charged your credit card $80. That's not a good plan. Don't do that at all. And parents do it all the time. I see it all the time. You don't need an outside agency to help you file the FAFSA. You have resources here at the school. You have resources within the colleges that you are interested in attending. And to be honest, this is one of the best 1-800 numbers I've ever called for a federal agency. They actually pick up the phone. So don't hesitate. I know everybody says, well, they look at the 1-800 number and kind of like, oh, I'm not doing that. Do it. They actually answer, and they're pretty helpful. So they can answer your questions better than any college can, because remember, this is a federal form. So there are certain questions that even the best of financial aid offices in the country won't have the answers to. It's a federal form, and they're going to be the best source of help for you. You can file on paper, I think still, but I haven't seen a paper FAFSA filed in about 4 years. So I don't encourage it, and electronically is the easiest way to do it, specifically when it comes to the income section, because the income section is always what makes people stumble. Now you can just link to the IRS, it pulls in your data appropriately, and you don't have any concern, did I add that extra zero to my income? Because people used to do that all the time. You know, they'd say, I don't know why my expected family contribution is $50,000 a year, and I'll look up their stuff and I'll say, but you make $200,000 a year. No, I make $20,000 a year. So if you use that data retrieval tool, you can just link it and it'll just pull in the information appropriately. And that information is used to calculate your expected family contribution. And we use that expected family contribution to award the aid. And we talked about the data retrieval tool. I think that once you have filed the FAFSA, I think I Once you file the FAFSA, you're going to make sure that you sign it. So you're signing it and your student is signing it electronically. Okay, there's a process on there where you will file your FAFSA. Now, say you get halfway, or say you file it and then you forgot to count, maybe you're pregnant and you forgot to count the baby that's about to be born into your family, and you put 4 in the family, but you're actually going to be 5 in the family, and you go in there and you change the number of people in your household, you have to sign it again, and so does your student have to sign it again. And I think that's one of the biggest errors I see. Families will file successfully, they'll go in and make a change and forget to have either person sign it, and now we're getting, as the school, an invalid FAFSA, and it sort of stops from there. We're waiting for you to go back in, confirm those changes, and not just the parent, but the student has to do that as well. So anytime you change it, make sure you re-sign.
So
Yes.
if you go from estimated to actual?
Yes,
and
re-sign, yeah. We sort of talked about the rest of that.
Can I ask something about the PIN?
Yes.
So the PIN is something I would get started with now. Once the FAFSA opens, that PIN site can take an awful long time. I've experienced with students where it can take a couple days to a week or two to get that from your PIN application, because you have to apply, you type in all your information, you get a PIN that you create back, that's your digital signature. That PIN, once kind of things start happening with all the, millions or tens of thousands of people working on the FAFSA, starting January 1, that PIN site gets backed up, and can take longer than you're wanting to wait. If you expect to submit the PIN, get it back, and like an email password, it's not going to work like that. So that's something you can start now, but it's something you have to protect and keep safe. It's like your social security number, it's your digital signature, so make sure that you write it down, don't forget it, keep it somewhere safe that you'll be able to access it, because you do have to submit the FAFSA every single year.
Yeah.
So that's just something you guys can start now and start gathering some of these documents ahead of time so you're ready January 1st to kind of make the next step.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. We just attended the Federal Student Aid Conference in Atlanta, and that's the one thing they're going to change on the rollout for January. So it'll be similar to that, but it'll be a little bit different. It's a username and password now. So the PIN process will change. I wasn't attending, my assistant was, so I don't have a ton of information on that. But yes, that username and password will replace the PIN, but you'll want to keep it. It'll be the same for you each year that you file. And you'll be surprised, you're going to need it for, your student is going to need it for their student loans, because everything they do on that federal student aid site will tie back to the username and password. They can keep it for 4 years. They're going to need it to sign their loan documents. They're going to need it to do loan entrance counseling, because all of the students have to go through a loan entrance counseling so they know their rights and responsibilities before they actually have the loan dispersed. And the same thing goes for parents. If you're going to do a parent loan, you're going to use that username and PIN. So you would be surprised how many times you're going to use that login information. So keep it and store it and be prepared to use it numerous times. And I promise the financial aid process gets so much easier after the first time.
And so you have different pins for different kids?
In the past, you have had different pins for different kids. Now the username and password, the new functionality on the username and password, I'm not exactly sure on if that's going to be different. But your student always had different PIN number. As a parent, you didn't, but you had to specify which FAFSA you were going in and signing. And parents have different PINs too, just to make it a little more complex. You can't use your wife's PIN in your, or parents can't interchange, or there's not one per parent, couple. They're separate for different parents. Okay. And I think I might want to address also, there's a lot of students who have parents that are no longer married. And the ruling on who files the FAFSA is who has primary custody of that student. And if there is a 50-50 custody, the family gets to determine whose parent is filing the FAFSA. Okay, so that, if you want more information on that, if it's more complex than that, which sometimes it is, that 1-800 number you can call, and they will give you exact, you can tell them your personal scenario, and they will give you more detailed information on that. So the paper, okay, so what happens is you file that FAFSA, then what happens next? Sort of goes into the abyss. You're going to include all the different schools that you're interested in. Most parents will include up to 10 schools, that's the max. what will happen is that once you've successfully filed the FAFSA, you're going to be looking for the SAR, and that's the student aid report. That report will be emailed to you, whatever email you provided in the FAFSA. And that will go to your student. So be looking for it. You might want to prompt them. Your student is probably not going to be super excited to see the SAR, but you will, because that's the opportunity for you to make sure that the information that you put on the FAFSA is accurate. It's basically a sort of a list format where the FAFSA is sort of like, oh, from this box, and now you're at a new page, and now you're at a new page. It gives it in list format, so you can really quickly kind of scan down, and you'll be that parent that said, oh, I don't make $200,000, I make $20,000. So it gives you an opportunity to quickly look over the data you put in the FAFSA to catch really quickly any errors. If you do see an error on that FAFSA, you can just log back in, change the data, you and your student re-sign that FAFSA, and it'll electronically go to all the schools on the list. So anytime you make a change to that FAFSA, don't worry, all of the schools that you put on that FAFSA at the very end, you can pick up to 10 schools. Anytime you make a change and both e-sign, that change will automatically go to the schools that you're interested in updating. Obviously, once you've picked a school and you file the FAFSA the sophomore year, you're only putting the one school on the FAFSA.
What if you're applying to 11 schools?
If you're applying to 11 schools, that's a good question.
So basically,
Yeah.
you
Like, do like the
Go for it.
UCs count as one?
Do the UCs count as one
No.
instead of four?
So what you have to do, and I'll double check this, but most students don't apply to 11, but if you do apply to 11, essentially you will fill out 10, you'll submit, and then you go back and there's an option to add more schools. I'll double check the exact language in the exact spot. There's a way to add more than 10. It's a little more, like you have to go back and either erase and resubmit again or something like that. I'll double check and make sure, but there is a way to submit more than 10.
Yeah. And then so you were looking for that SAR and you want to prompt your student to say, hey, did you get that student aid report? Let's glance at it together, make sure that we are incoming information incorrectly. Catch any things that are off, and review, and again, review it and update estimated information when actual figures are available. So if you do say, you know, based on last year, this is what I made, it's an estimated amount of money, once you file your taxes, please go back in and use that data retrieval tool. That data retrieval tool can do a few things for you. So once you submit to these schools, the schools that you have applied to and been accepted to will then send you a financial aid package. It's important that you make sure that the financial aid package that you're interested in, or the school that you're interested in has sent you a financial aid package. So if you've done all of those things and you haven't received anything, you probably need to contact the school and find out, you know, why haven't I received financial aid packages. Normally, schools will send them out April 1st, so don't panic if it's March and you haven't received one. Our school, because we're smaller and a private college, we get them out usually February, end of February, but the larger schools won't send anything until April 1st. And I just wanted to say that there are some special circumstances. So, you know, sometimes families have circumstances that you can't really depict on the FAFSA. So, for example, a student filed the FAFSA in January, and in March, one of their parents passed away. There's no longer income from that parent. There's no way on the FAFSA to go in there and say, well, now this person doesn't exist anymore. You would need to call the financial aid office. The same goes for loss of income. You know, the same goes for, there's other circumstances. So if your family has a circumstance that can't be easily described in the FAFSA because it is just a standard form, then you should make sure to contact your financial aid office, let them know that you have special circumstances and that you would like to speak normally with the director of the department who will help you understand what provisions can be made for you. And those changes sometimes have to be made by the institution themselves. Unfortunately, if you've applied to 10 schools, you're going to have to tell that story 10 times. And sometimes that story is not a story that you want to tell and it's uncomfortable. But realize this is private information. Financial aid directors in all schools, generally, I mean, are there to help you, they're there to assist you, and they're really the only person that can make this change for you. So know that going forward. One other thing about that data retrieval tool, once you've submitted the FAFSA to all the different schools, we've sent out award letters, you've accepted your aid that you want, maybe you want the free aid, maybe you don't want the loans, maybe you want the sub-loan, you don't. That you get a chance to make all those decisions. Sometimes you're selected for a process called verification. Typically 30% or more of the students that apply to your college will be selected for verification. This is a random, they say random selection at the Department of Education level, and the school is required to verify the data elements on that FAFSA. So most likely we have to verify through an additional form, you know, how many people are in your household. You sort of have to answer some of those key questions again. And we have to make sure that what you're telling on the FAFSA is accurate information. The number one reasons for being selected for verification is getting free grant aid. So unfortunately, the burden is really on the families that will qualify for the federal Pell Grant, but also the families that don't use the data retrieval tool. Because they can't, when you use the data retrieval tool, that information is coming directly from the IRS. So the school is not required to verify that income information because the government already did. If you don't use the data retrieval tool and you are selected for verification, we are going to prompt you to use the data retrieval tool, log back in, use the data retrieval tool. That will make sure that that data element is verified. And we'll have you fill out a verification form. If you use it to begin with, your chances of being selected for verification are lowered. And with all the pressures of getting your student into school, accepting the financial aid for the first time, navigating through the federal student aid system, being selected for verification is just one more of those added pressures. So if I could just encourage you to use that data retrieval tool and sort of help some of you from being selected for verification. It's not that hard of a process, but it's just one more thing when you're new to this whole environment. So I encourage you to do that. Does anyone have any questions that I didn't cover?
You said that it's a good idea to go into the individual colleges that your kids apply into and see what they offer. Are you supposed to do that before they get accepted to these colleges? Because that might be the end of March or something before.
Well, I mean, it's going to help you make your college choice sometimes. So financial aid packages typically tip the scale one way or the other on which choice. Sometimes the choice is, Mom and Dad, I really want to go to these 10 schools, but this school is giving me these grants and this information. I hear it. This is what I have, and the out-of-pocket cost to go to this college is $5,000, and the out-of-pocket cost to go to this college is $20,000. That might be a deal breaker for your family.
So it'll tell you what you'll get prior to being admitted to the school.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions about filing the FAFSA? If your student didn't make any money, when you file the FAFSA, you just say, there's no income. So you're done.
Is that under 3,000? What's the threshold?
I think the threshold is 5.
5?
Yeah, if they filed their taxes.
6 for my taxes.
Yeah, it's whatever the tax threshold is, it's the same. Yeah.
Okay, so you can say 0.
Yeah, it says, I did not, you can say, it's gonna ask you, and you say they did not file taxes, but they got a W-2. You still have to include that income that they just received on a W-2, maybe it was $2,000. You just put it in that category. But when it comes time for a verification, if they didn't file taxes, there's nothing for us to verify. So they will bring us in a W-2 or something like that just to show that they earned $2,000. But there's no tax document like the IRS data retrieval tool. If you can't use the data retrieval tool, and sometimes you can't, there is a form from the federal government that you have to request and have it sent to the college. And we used to be able to take a copy of your tax return. The government won't let us take your tax return anymore. So it's actually an income something, I can't remember, but it's the form, and you actually have to get that directly from the federal government because the government wanted to close that gap between, here's my income tax return and the edits that can come from that. So actually it's to be a different form.
that it's better to wait until you file your taxes to apply for FAFSA instead of doing it? I wouldn't know.
It depends. If you feel like your family has need, I would file it January 1 because there's some need-based aid that you're gonna miss out on because it's first come, first served. So you could file with estimated information, and when your family files their taxes, then you go in there and update it. If you're quite sure that you're probably not going to qualify for any federal free aid, applying when your family's filed their taxes is simpler.
Sometimes if you're especially looking at private type schools that are any more expensive that have that institutional aid, I've heard circumstances where it is much better to file sooner rather than later because that pool is also finite and will go kind of first come first serve as well.
Absolutely.
So I typically just suggest file it as soon as you can. Most people aren't going to have their taxes done until the last minute, like most of us. Go back and edit it. You know, you can do the FAFSA forecaster to kind of, there's basically a fake FAFSA, you can get an estimate in terms of like what you're going to be getting back. If your income is significantly different than it was the year before. I usually just say use your prior year's tax return information, enter that, and go back in. You just have to remember to go back in and update it once you file your taxes. That's the biggest piece.
Yeah, and it's about 2 weeks after you file your taxes that you can use that data retrieval tool. So if you use the estimated data, and then you go and use the data retrieval tool, once you file your taxes, once you filed your taxes, give it about 2 weeks for them to process everything so that your data is available in the retrieval tool.
And it's not cumbersome to do the estimated and then redo it?
The estimated, I mean, it's not cumbersome. It is a little bit more work because when you go in and do the estimated, you can't use the data retrieval tool, so you're doing the, this line item minus this line item, and you've got your tax, your last year's tax return next to you, so you're doing the math and filling in those numbers, whereas if you file after you filed your taxes and you use that data retrieval tool, it literally knows what form you filed and will pull that information and put it in all the line items for itself. So yeah, it is a little bit more work, but if you are in the need-based categories, absolutely worth the extra time.
Any other questions, guys? She's the expert. You got it here now.
I have my card up here, and I have an actual brochure that's called Applying for Financial Aid. It's specific to Sierra Nevada College, but there's some, it's pretty, the financial aid process across the country is very standard format, so most everything will apply.
If you guys don't have any questions, I'm going to take like 5 minutes and just kind of cover a little bit more specifics about our school and what our process is. But I want to thank Nicole for coming and sharing. I thought that was really good information. But quickly, guys, I know that we're going to try and get out of here pretty quick. But basically, some big things that I want to make sure you guys all know. Specific to like scholarships, like she said, scholarships will start coming up. I post scholarships in 2 places. As they come in through my office. Okay, so only the ones that come through my office am I necessarily posting. There are tons out there that you can go search out as well. The web is a great resource for searching out scholarships. Most of those scholarships are going to be the larger national, quote-unquote, sweepstakes scholarships. Your Coca-Cola, your Dr. Pepper, McDonald's, that kind of thing. Where it's kind of like the big money, wow, that's a lot of money if I win this, but you're competing against millions of students. And it's really like, a sweepstakes if you win it. The ones that you're most likely going to get are your local and regional scholarships, or local, regional, and even state level, but mostly like kind of northern SAC area, maybe Reno sometimes lets us apply. Some of the kind of western Nevada scholarships allow our students to apply there because we're right on that line. And then our local ones. So those are going to be the ones that I typically will have posted specifically for our school. I post them in the front office. There's a little blue kind of poster board thing right across from where Cindy sits. I post them up there with the date posted. And then also on your student's Naviance account. So there's an electronic thing that they can link to that I also link the application or the website that you need to go to apply with all the information, including deadlines and that kind of thing. Like you said, deadlines are super important for all of this process. Seniors, it's deadline fever. Like, You have a lot to pay attention to, you have a lot to keep track of. A calendaring tool is definitely important. So even with your applications, your scholarships now have deadlines too. Our local ones, we have basically two major local ones. Our two local ones, and they do not help us at all by naming them this, is our Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation Scholarship, and the Tahoe Truckee Community Scholarship Foundation. Believe it or not, yes, they did that to us. I had the hardest time my first year figuring that piece out. Those are two separate applications by two local organizations, and they're two general applications. So both of those separate applications have sub-scholarships. So both of those encompass about 60 to 70 different scholarships at different amounts from different organizations that decided instead of making kids fill out 60 or 70 applications, we're going to have them fill out two, and they basically have a committee that goes through and awards scholarships based on your application. Some are need-based, some are merit-based. It very much depends. That will be coming out. I haven't even got the application yet, but you will all know about those for sure. I will make sure that your kids have like 8 copies of that application, because that is our biggest money. We gave away almost $400,000 last year. They gave away almost $400,000 I think last year, just to seniors in our graduating class. So that's a huge amount of money.
For the district or?
These organizations, the district, we did. Yeah, but to our students. Just at our school. And Truckee also gets, they're a part of this application too, but they a lot of times have individual scholarships will delegate, we want this to go to North Tahoe, or we want one to go to each school with this amount of money and that kind of thing. Some of our bigger ones, the Tahoe Mountain Resorts is another kind of local scholarship. That's a big one. Their top award in the last 2 years has been about $30,000, not per year, but overall. So that's a huge one. And then there's a couple lower level scholarships.
Is that one considered Tahoe also, or is it not Truckee?
It's both. Like Hackler-Raby, he won it, Patrick, 2 years ago, and he got that scholarship, so that's a big deal. But even like she said, I'm all about if it's gonna take you 2 hours to write an essay and you get $1,000, that's $500 an hour. I would gladly quit my job and make $500 an hour. If I could. So it's well worth your time. And yeah, there's some competition, but that's your motivation to do a good job. Those are our local ones. Our regional ones you can see posted. Be sure on all these applications to read the entire application. Some of them are very specific in terms of the requirements that they need from you or your student, both in terms of eligibility to apply and also what they are asking for you in terms of your application process. Some of them might be very specific. You have to be Catholic, you have to be Irish, and you have to be from San Francisco to apply for the scholarship. That's good and bad. It's good if you fit in that set of people because it's specific, so there's a less pool to fight against. But it's also bad because it might exclude you from some of those scholarships. Okay, so make sure you read it, and you don't want to waste time filling out a scholarship that you can't technically even apply for. Okay, that Cal Grant form, again, please get that back to us as soon as possible. In the new year, we'll be doing a much larger push to get that back from students who are a little bit late. We have to have it in to the state by March 2nd, meaning we need this back from students at least probably a week or two before that, because there's a lot of paperwork and process on our side that we have to make happen and get this to them. We send it in electronically, but this allows us to release information about your student to the state. Okay, don't not do that. That's free money waiting.
Can that be done now?
Yes, turn it in now. If you guys can get it done now, you can give it to either me, have your student give it to me, or Lofty in the front office. That's it.
I want to say one more thing. I think I forgot to mention that schools also have internal deadlines for filing the FAFSA. So make sure that the schools that you are going to apply to or have applied to and that you want to receive the FAFSA information, they will have a FAFSA deadline on their financial aid page. Some schools don't have them. Sierra Nevada College, you can file the last day of your spring semester if you want to. Other colleges, if it's not done by March 1st or April 1st, they won't process it later in the semester or through the summer. So it's really important to be on top of the financial aid, and not only the application deadline, but the application for federal student aid at their college.
Yeah. Most of them have a priority deadline, which is middle of spring, usually around March. You can, if you miss that for some reason, still file. Like you can still be eligible, but some of like the initial programs go away, but you can still be eligible for some aid. Your best resource, like you said, is your colleges that you're applying to. Again, financial aid lives at the college, it doesn't live at the high school level, so if you have questions about things, most typically I will direct you to your college's financial aid office for answers. I won't necessarily know the answers, because one, they're individual by school a lot of times, and two, I'd rather give you to the expert to give you the right answer than make a guess and give you a wrong answer and have you be mad at me for that. So you know, definitely, just like with calling the admissions office, I highly suggest if you have questions, reach out. They're very helpful. They're there. That's what their job is. They're experts at it, and they know their school's process and system. But there was a question about looking at the pages on the financial aid. Definitely, that's a great resource. Just like the admissions page for when you're looking at applying, use that financial aid page, because sometimes schools will have a separate application. Sometimes schools will have what's called a CSS profile. A lot of times, private schools will have you fill out both. CSS profile is, that's a whole other conversation, but it's basically an intense FAFSA. And many times it's more targeted towards kind of our more quote-unquote elite private schools in most cases. So that's something to see if you need to fill out the CSS profile. Typically that's due much earlier in the school year. So that's definitely a page that you want to look at.
If you fill out the CSS profile and then you do the FAFSA, do they pull up the CSS profile to see what you filed on that?
Probably.
Yes.
Because they're very in-depth about
Yes.
everything.
Yeah.
And when we tried to hire a financial advisor, they wanted us to put other information on things that we own, which in the CSS profile, there's absolutely no way to do that. And
It's a little more complicated, but it's basic. Most of the time when they ask you for information, it's for good reasons. So if they're asking you for information and they want the detailed information, a lot of times it's so they can determine who to give the award money to. A lot of times those schools will have a much larger, what's called an endowment, which lets them give away money. Rich people who make it big, like Kinko's or something like that, they go back, buy a building and then donate $1 million. And that goes into like an endowment to further either programs at the school or also help fund education for students. So a lot of times they have large endowments, so they have to figure out in a way that's more in depth than like the FAFSA to give out that money fairly and adequately and appropriately. But definitely check that page for the financial aid, because they will have specifics about their school, about the deadlines. Sometimes they have each individual, sometimes if you have a specific department or college that you're looking at, look on their website too. Sometimes they will have a specific departmental scholarship that has a supplemental application that you have to fill out. So there's a lot of digging and data mining that you have to do for this process, but trust me, I know that everyone's busy, but if it nets you $1,000, that's an extra $1,000 that you don't have to pay. Okay, spending a couple minutes browsing the web. You can even pick up the phone call and call the department directly and say, I'm a student, I'm applying to the College of Engineering. I'm curious if you have any scholarship applications specific for your college that I can fill out. They can say yes or no. If they say yes, they'll direct you to it. If they say no, great, thank you, goodbye. Call the next school. You spent 30 seconds instead of digging around the website for an hour trying to find it. I think that's pretty much essentially what I had to share with you guys regarding our process at the school. The only last thing I want to share with you is in January, not right off the bat when we get back, but probably midway, I will basically have probably a similar time frame, just essentially an open lab where I'll have some computers set up. You can bring your own computers if you'd like, and we can sit down and basically you can fill out the FAFSA and submit it here. That way if you get stuck, if you have questions, I can sit there, and we can troubleshoot together. You can get on the phone. I can be basically just a resource that sometimes people feel most comfortable with someone who has done it or seen other people do it before. If you're on top of it, if you file your taxes, it's easier than filing your taxes. So it's not a terribly difficult process, and it has gotten easier. But just keep an eye out. I'll send some emails and a phone call about when that kind of evening will be. But I'll be here probably about 5 o'clock. I would say like the 15th or 16th-ish of January, middle of the month. Does anybody have any questions for me? All right. Well, if you guys do, again, don't hesitate to contact me. But again, financial aid offices are also available to you if it's a more in-depth question that I might not know the answer to.
Which
Thanks, guys, and thank you, Nicole and Natalie.
Hasn't changed. Yeah. About the what? Oh,
Because he got the whole ride. Yeah, plays the game.
Well, like, surprise boys. During lunches and we're all about like
Twice a year.
Once a year. It's getting better.
I want to, yes, good point. This is only for seniors. So, I mean, it's good information for juniors, but filing your FAFSA is not for juniors. Only seniors. This year is the money that will count towards your next year. Yes, towards fall. But you don't go on and line and fill the FAFSA. I forgot to mention.
Your savings account, quit your job.